The Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you so
5 minutes.
much, Mr.
Ileana.
Chairman. ISIL's reach into the United States has been documented. We also know that ISIL is known to be tech savvy, as we have discussed, has used social media tools to its advantage to help recruit foreign fighters to its cause. And we've seen ISIL graffiti here in D.C., pictures of individuals holding the group's symbol in front of U.S. landmarks, including the White House. And Mr. Warwick, you testified that DHS is, quote, unaware of any specific credible threat to the U.S. homeland from ISIL, end quote. And following up on what Mr. Wilson said in his opening statement, on Sunday, DHS and FBI issued a joint bulletin urging our service members to scrub their social media accounts, to use caution with their posts. Is there a specific threat to our servicemen and women, most of whom are stationed here in America? And I'll have you hold that thought. On funding, ISIL is known to finance its operations from a variety of sources, including illicit oil sales, extortion, organized crime, selling of ancient artifacts, donations from outside sources. We've seen terrorist groups like Hezbollah fund their terror activities through the sale of drugs, often from sources in the Western Hemisphere. What are we doing to target ISIL's funding? What kind of ISIL collaboration with drug cartels? Is there any evidence of that, especially here in our hemisphere? And if so, what are we doing to fight this? And lastly, on our allies, in order to defeat ISIL, we're going to need full cooperation with our coalition partners, especially those from the Middle East. The ministers of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, have scheduled multiple meetings to discuss the ongoing threat of ISIL and possible ways to fight this terrorist entity. And just yesterday, Bahrain foreign ministers announced that the Gulf states are setting up a joint military command based in Saudi Arabia to not only counter the ISIL threat, but the threat from Iran as well. So I'll ask, in what ways are we working with the Gulf nations to fight this radical Islam ideology, and is this joint command a signal that they may be willing to put boots on the ground in Syria?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Let me start on that, and then obviously Ambassador Bradke will have things to say about the last part. First on the, I'm going to do this in reverse order, on the ISIL funding issue. That question actually probably would be best addressed to the Treasury Department. Undersecretary Cohen and Assistant Secretary Glazer are working very intensively in efforts to try to address the ISIL funding issue. DHS plays a small role in that in terms of criminal investigations about funding activities that go.
Is there a specific threat to our servicemen and women?
I'm working backwards to that one. On that one, let me go back to what we said over the weekend. There were statements, public statements by ISIL in September to the effect of calls for attacks against U.S. service members, U.S. officials, and members of the intelligence community. We are not aware of any specific threat saying that at a particular time there would be an attack on a particular service member, but we really do want to be able to have members of the state and local law enforcement and members of the military community and their families take certain reasonable precautions to just further reduce the risk of any types of events taking place. We're very mindful of the techniques of the use of social media that you that you described, and that ISIL is able to use, and obviously they are able to survey social media as well as themselves.
And Ambassador, on the issue of our allies, are they fighting back this radical Islam ideology? And do you have any info about whether they're willing to put boots on the ground in Syria?
Well, we have a very close partnership with the countries in the Gulf. They are members of this coalition that I mentioned of 60 countries that General Allen has worked to put together. A number of them are carrying out airstrikes in Iraq, so we're getting that kind of assistance for them. We're working very closely with them to cut off funding. I was in Kuwait and Qatar over the summer Qatar has just passed a new law on private charities, which will try to be more effective in regulating the flow of funding in cases where individuals have contributed money thinking it was going to some humanitarian cause, but was ending up going to a terrorist organization. So they're taking steps in that regard. They're also working with us on the counter-messaging front. There was just a conference in Kuwait that Undersecretary of State Stengel went to, where we talked about what we're doing on counter-messaging, how we are working through the Center for Strategic Counterterrorism Communications. A number of our partners in the Gulf are interested in setting up similar operations, perhaps, or having a regionally based counter-messaging operation. So again, we have a very close partnership with.
Thank you. My time is up. But are those is the graffiti that we've seen in D.C. and other cities, are those legitimate, or do you think that they're not?
That would actually be a question that I think would be better addressed by either the FBI or domestic law enforcement. They'd be able to help you with that.
Chair recognizes